week 11 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few tight ends I have as sleeper options this week. The first guy, Dan Arnold of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I've spoken about Arnold a lot this season, I feel like, here in my videos, but Dan Arnold, he goes out there and he gets the job done, no doubt about it, and somehow he's still available in 62% of fantasy leagues. And this week here, he don't have the greatest of matchups, I know, versus the San Francisco 49ers that give up the 8th least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season, but he's been going out there and getting the job done the last 3 weeks. Week 8 at Seattle, 8 catches, 68 yards. Week 9 versus the Bills, 4 catches, 60 yards. And Week 10 at the Colts, 5 catches, 67 yards, and a 2-point conversion. So right here, he's a favorite target of Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. And that's what rookie quarterbacks need, a tight end they can rely on as a security blanket. And that's exactly what Arnold has been this season. So I think, once again, this week here versus the 49ers in Week 11, he has his 4th double-digit fantasy game in a row. And it's just surprising to me he's not owned in more leagues. The next tight end I have as a sleeper this week's Gerald Everett of the Seattle Seahawks. So last week, Everett had a nice fantasy game. 8 catches, 63 yards for 14.30 fantasy points in PPR leagues, where this Seattle Seahawks team couldn't get anything going in the air besides Gerald Everett. And this week, I know it's a tough matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals that give up the least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. But I think in this game, we're going to see Seattle throw the football a ton in this one. And they got to win this game, where their playoff hopes are pretty much out of reach here. So Gerald Everett, he's been a nightmare problem for some defenses. But like I mentioned, Arizona is the best versus tight ends. But for some reason, I could see Everett once again having a pretty decent game, anywhere from 8 to 10 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And right now, he's available in 80% of leagues. And right now, the tight end position is very weak this season, but I definitely got him as a sleeper this week. In the third and final tight end I have as a sleeper this week's Kmet of the Chicago Bears. So Kmet, over the last few weeks, him and Justin Fields are getting on the same page, and he's putting up numbers as well here for this Bear team. Week 7 at Tampa Bay, 5 catches, 43 yards. Week 8 versus the Niners, 3 catches, 24 yards. And Week 9 at the Steelers, 6 catches, 87 yards. So right here, he's got a good matchup in Week 11. Baltimore gives up the 3rd most points to tight ends. And right here, this is where the Bears are going to have to try to win this game, in my opinion. Running the football and hitting those short intermediate routes to the tight ends or their wide receivers. So Kmet, I think he could put up a decent game in this one. 6 or 7 catches possibly for 50 or 60 yards. And he's definitely a player available widely in fantasy leagues at 78%. So right here, he's definitely a sleeper option. So that's a few tight ends I have as sleepers for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.